So, you're here because you heard something. I really want to know, what would you like to receive from me? And let me just say that I have different hats. I'm a professor, I'm a spiritual teacher, Sufi teacher, storyteller, poet. I could share some poetry with you. If you had questions, we could have a conversation. There's a great story about this little female ant in the Quran who confronts King Solomon, which I really love. And I was thinking, oh, I could share that story with you. There's something in there about feminine power and the power of nature in the face of patriarchy and worldly might that's very inspiring to me, and I'm writing about it nowadays. So I just wondered if some of you would be yes to the ant story. Okay. The poem that I presented, let me see, I'm seeing this in chat. I'm definitely going to hear it. Okay. Can the poem be shared? Yes, I'd be happy. I'd be happy to share the poem with you. Let me share the story of the ant. And then I'd like to have more than a few minutes for conversation. So after this story, so this story is about King Solomon. And Solomon was not only a king, he was also a messenger of the divine. He was a prophet. So in the material realm and in the spiritual realm, he held great power, great authority. And even among the prophets and the kings, he was very special. In the Quran, he speaks the language of all the different creatures. So he understands the animal language, the language of the beasts, the languages of the jinn and the spirits. And he's marching with his army, and his army has beasts, it has animals, there's birds, there's jinn in his army, these beings of fire. And as he's marching through this land, he hears a voice. And the voice is the voice of this namla. So naml is an ant, and there's actually an entire Quranic surah called the ant. But this namla is feminine, singular. So this namla is this little female ant, and she calls out to her people, and she says to her community, rush into your dwellings quickly, lest Solomon and his army trample you unaware. And so when I interpret this, it's part of a larger project I'm working on the relationship between Bilqis, the Queen of Sheba, and Solomon in the Quran, and this mutual journey of learning and wholeness that they take. And I interpret it also as this kind of masculine and feminine energy coming to a unity and growing together. But as a preface to this, there's this Namla, and I think she's foreshadowing actually the Queen of Sheba. And I say she's the queen. She must be the queen of the ants. So the queen of the ants says this to her people. And what happens? You have this like patriarch of patriarchs, Solomon. What does he do? So the first thing he does is he pauses. Well, the first thing he does is he hears her. He actually hears her voice. He understands the language of this creature who's so tiny, who is, their symbols. He's a symbol of a certain kind of power, of vastness, whereas she's this tiny creature from the animal kingdom, and he's probably riding on some caparisoned, horse or something, and, I don't know, or on the wings of a jinn, maybe. She's on the earth. She's from within the earth. She's an ant. But he hears, and then he pauses. And then he pauses in a way that is not condescending, that is not like noblesse oblige, because he smiles, he laughs, he has an affective engagement with her. He's charmed, and her wisdom, her perspicacity, her protectiveness of her people is something that he recognizes. So he pauses, hears, pauses, and smiles. And the final thing he does, I think it's quite extraordinary, and that is that he takes a different path. The Quran says he takes a different path. And of course, if you think about this army of his, it's not some nimble little vessel. It's not a kayak that you can turn on a dime. It's this vast army. And there are descriptions about how it's all arrayed in lines and in flanks. And it's, not just on the earth, it's like in the air. It's like an immense cruise ship or a battleship or something. And he turns it around. And so for me, this is a model for how we who have privilege, who have power, how we are to be when we are faced with vulnerable people, vulnerable ecosystems, economic systems, communities. If you think about the ant, the ant, first of all, the ant is extraordinary. It carries its own weight, right? It's capable of transporting its own weight. We, can't carry what an ant can carry. And then there's this kind of integrated, cohesive community within the world of ants. They have their own roles, they cooperate. And if you've ever seen, there's videos on YouTube where they actually pour metal down into abandoned ant holes. They pour liquid metal. And when it hardens and you remove it, it's this incredible, vast, elegant network. I also have talked about this story in relationship to communities that are marginalized, gender minorities, sexual minorities. I mean, all kinds of other communities that we have in society as well that are not visible to us, whose voices we're incapable of hearing. And theologically, as a theologian, certainly Muslim theologians, Christian, Jewish theologians, we sometimes trample over these spaces. So I think this model of having the capacity to hear another language, then pausing, then having an affective engagement so that we're actually on the level with other beings, grounding ourselves in that reality and being human with their humanity, or being in relation with their relationality. And then, even if we have a vast army, or I sometimes argue, even if we have a long history of certain kinds of theologies that would marginalize people, we can take that vast ship with her, and we can turn aside in order not to destroy something which is deeply precious, even if it's hidden to the vision of many. But in this case also, when we look at this women and the power of women, I think it's extraordinary that it's this feminine being, this namla, this she ant, who is given like a voice. And the story in the Quran actually really, she's foregrounded. It starts with her and her calling out. So that was a kind of story that I wanted to share. It's one of the things that's so beautiful is that many of the stories that are in the Torah or in the Gospels, whether canonical or apocryphal Gospels as well, also appear in the Quran, or those figures appear in the Quran, but the story is slightly different. There's a narrative that doesn't appear, or sometimes it's an apocryphal narrative that gets center of place in the Quran, or the ending shifts, the emphasis shifts. So I think we have an immense amount to learn from one another. One of the things when I first started studying comparative religion is people would say to me, "Oh, you studied all the religions, so which one is the best? Tell me now which one is the best." And I'd always laugh and say, "Well, I'm not studying comparative religion, not competitive religion." And that used to be what I said, but now, it's different. My new formulation, something I'm writing about, is that what we need in this moment is collaborative religion. As the glaciers are receding, as we are destroying this balance, and as spiritual values and values of connection and relation and wholeness are being so threatened by, the values of acquisitiveness and plunder, we are called upon to collaborate with one another. And one of the ways that I love to do this is by sharing these stories and inspiration. So thank you so much for coming to be here. I'm really touched and honored. And I'd love to, there's, how many minutes did you say we have left, my friend?
We have about 8 minutes left.
8 minutes left. So yeah, let's have any requests. I mean, I can share another poem with you, but I can also, I'd love to hear your response. Why did you come to be in this room, and what else can we share? Yes. Yeah, Rachel, you can unmute yourself, or Jennifer, you'll unmute her.
I really, really was touched by your talking about your eyes speaking, and from people in the past, that everybody that you've connected with. And then when you told the ant story, and I see in the speaker view, I can see your eyes so warmly, so clearly. And yet when I heard you say something like King Solomon, I thought, as a Jewish woman and from the Quran, I thought, all right, I braced myself that instead of collaboration, it was going to be regurgitating and somehow making it less, making it a power issue in a way that really didn't serve that collaboration mindset. And I was so grateful. I'm going to repeat that story and this story about us to others in my circle. And I'm grateful for you and this place. You're muted, I think.
It's the classic Zoom. That's in the Zoom bingo. You know, you mute yourself when you're meaning to unmute. That's always on Zoom bingo. It's the, you know, Rachel, one thing I didn't say that I wished I had said, which is the other part of it, is that I also am receiving from you, from your eyes, you know, the teaching from the teaching, from the teaching, from the teaching, the mothering from the mothering, from the mothering, the fathering from the fathering, the love of everyone who's gazed into your eyes. This is a fundamental Sufi teaching. And in Sufi communities, this is why nazar, like how we gaze, what do we transmit with our gaze, what do we receive with our gaze, is a critical practice. And we have many, many spiritual practices where we have circle ceremony, and gazing is actually part of the practice, developing the luminosity and the awareness of the gaze, as well as the breath. These are the two main ways that so thank you so much. And of course, yeah, we do brace ourselves. And I also know that, yeah, in Jewish tradition, also Solomon and David, there's, you know, it's quite different in the Quran, actually. And you know, there's the whole kind of rape story. It's a different, you know, so there's, and I know some kids who've had the challenge of dealing with that, like that was their bar mitzvah reading, you know, having to encounter that. I mean, I think this is incredibly powerful, that young people just, like, whatever the reading is that comes up, sometimes it's like boring. It's just so halakhic, it's law. And it's like, you know, sometimes it's challenging. That's, so our texts are that way, but the Quranic story is actually quite distinctive. Thank you. Yes, did someone else have something they would like to share? Yes, Naima.
Yes, hi. So wonderful to be with you all, and thank you so much. I grew up with an Imam father. My family is Sunni, and
From where?
hearing Islam from a different ear, like I'm in the beginning of reintroducing myself back into Islam, and I have heard this story my whole life. And my whole life, it's been told from the perspective of the compassionate, you know, Nabi Sulaiman, and the pity, you know, the ant, you know. But it's the spin on it. I'd never considered it. And of course, I had to stop and say, no, I'm like, duh. I didn't think about it, but somehow we've been all conditioned to give importance to the masculine. So that's what we saw, or at least that's how I got the story. Thank you for bringing that part out for me, and I can't wait to share it with my siblings.
We have about 3
well,
minutes
I-
left, just so that you
Okay,
know.
I mean, you've just made my heart sing. One of my great joys is working with other Muslim women and young people and sharing and reconsidering. And if any of you want to be in touch with me, my email. Well, I'm on Facebook, but also my email is just my name with no caps @gmail.com, all one word, seemighazi@gmail.com. And I'd love to share more with you. I can share some of my writings and other things, Naima. There's so many resources that are worth looking into. So many amazing women interpreting these stories. So it's a joy to see you, and I hope Rachel and Naima that you'll stay in touch, any of you. Yeah, yes, Amy.
Hi, Seemi. I am from Vancouver, and I was hooked into your speech. Like it touched my heart. You say that we are holding you, because sometimes in my life I just feel alone, and I feel like I'm the only one who think this way, to think spiritually, and I just feel alone. But when you say that there is this difficult time, we see you, it just touched my heart and make me want to cry. So I and of course that you are in Vancouver, so I wonder if we can sometime we can meet each other for coffee, or how can I keep in contact with you?
Yeah, just send me an email at seemighazi@gmail.com. I'd love to meet for coffee. And I do have gatherings that I lead, and people of all different faiths and no faiths come to those gatherings. So we do Sufi practice, but in a very universal way that embraces, all traditions and no tradition. And we'd love to have you join us, Amy. And again, you can, Seemi Ghazi is my name. You can find me on Facebook as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I would love to, Amy. Thank you so much. That was a different approach than everyone else was taking, but I felt we'd had so many beautiful words of wisdom that maybe it was time to go in to that other place. I was responding also to the balance, just bringing the balance into what everybody was offering, so that some of it was intellectual and some of it was just pausing and being.